Hi, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to my weekly podcast about spirituality, love, death, devotion, and waking up while living in a messy world. The Satsang with Shambhavi podcast is recorded live each week with students of our nonprofit community, Jayakula. For more information and to find out about attending a satsang, visit jayakula.org. Thanks for listening. Much love to you, wherever and however you are.
Can you talk about exhaustion? The sequester kind of feels exhausting.
It is exhausting. Yeah, I agree. So one of the things that's most exhausting is not feeling cared for. We've been living in a circumstance where we don't feel cared for a long time because the American system of governance is not caring. Capitalism is essentially not caring. And so that is a drain on everybody. Well, we've had the slow influx over time of many people in power who don't care, who have no ability to empathize, and who literally do not care what happens to other people. And then we have their appointed king, their representative at the top of the government, someone who is spectacularly unable to care about other people and have any empathy for anyone, and who is sort of the craziest example of that. And then we have COVID, ever-present situation that's also thrusting into our awareness that we're not cared for properly, and not being able to go to our usual places to feel more cared for. I mean, some of us are lucky to be in caring families, but, friends and being in community are very, very important. And then the exhaustion, one thing I've noticed in Jayakula, not being able to have as much physical contact with people and intimate conversations, IRL and all that, is exhausting. And then, of course, we're in a time period where certain particular kinds of cruelty and lack of care that have been ongoing ever since this country was stolen have also been much more in the public sphere and being more present for many people. So all of this is adding up to not feeling cared for, recognizing how we have failed to care for others, some of us, and recognizing the dire situation, how impermanent and fragile is really any country or any society or any system of government. It always was fragile, but now we're seeing that. And maybe also seeing how the lack of care has made it even more fragile, and maybe is the most spectacular, single most urgent reason why our system of governance and country and culture is so fragile. Lack of care for each other. It's just exhausting not to be cared for. And this is why all of us have some level of tiredness, but then there's certain groups of people who have been more seriously uncared for that have had to experience the results of that in their health and their feeling about being in the world and their relationships and their life. So all of this really adds up to that the only society that isn't exhausting is one where people are caring for each other properly. And how can we move toward that? I've noticed in Jayakula, I started to say, but then I forgot, that the exhaustion has caused people to be less cohesive. It's kind of interesting. Like, as we're exhausted because of the lack of care, that our community also feels more dispersed than it ever has in its entire history. And people are less responsive to each other and to me because people are just so exhausted. And I think a question for us as a community, those of you who are involved day to day, is how can we honor the fact that we are exhausted and need to take care of ourselves and need to do less, but also take care of each other better, recognizing that our exhaustion is from a lack of care. Being part of a community is that when things go wrong, whether it just be for one individual or a group of people or everyone, it really reveals things to us about ourselves and other people, about what is our capacity for compassion and real caring and putting that into action. This has come up before, long before the last year. And everyone is different in that regard. But I think that when we're stressed and things feel difficult, what is our response? Well, some people's response is to withdraw, and other people's response is to try to reach out, and everything in between. But there's been very little energy to like sort of bring people together in a time when we really need to be more together. That's just something to think about.
How would you define care?
I mean, it's so multi-layered and multifaceted. Let's just think about what a more enlightened condition is, and that is that caring and kindness just comes out. But it comes out skillfully. So when people bludgeon us with their caring, we recognize, and they try to care for people in ways that people don't want to be cared for. We recognize that as like codependency or something like that, that your gesture of caring is actually mostly for yourself and not for the other person. But I can just speak from my experience as a teacher that it's wonderful when people fully accept care and kindness and compassion. But when they don't, that doesn't mean I stop feeling it. It means that I just have to find more sneaky, subtle ways to express it, and just hope that at some point someone's going to feel something. But then also just have confidence that it's better even for people who reject it to be in an atmosphere of kindness and caring than not, right? I am not in control of the infinite mandala of events. I'm just doing my best to be open-hearted toward people and to be skillful in doing that, to not barge in where I'm not wanted, but also to not give up when I'm rejected. So then, there's very obvious, concrete ways we care for each other, but then there's very, very subtle ways, like just saying a prayer for somebody or just being soft around them, even when they're being harsh and things like that. So there's no way to catalog every possible way. But what I'm trying to say is that the more relaxed we are and the more there's genuine kindness that's just happening through the heart, that doesn't have any mediation, doesn't need to feel safe, doesn't need to be returned, etc., then there also skill comes along with that, skill in how to care and be kind for people. And for anyone, it's just about noticing and asking what people want and trying to kind of suss out what is it that someone could receive and maybe what they couldn't. And having confidence that if you express yourself or you just let your kindness be there, even if it's just your own feeling, that it's going to be beneficial in some way, even though you may not see the direct outcome.
I think that what I've experienced sometimes, especially with family members caring for me, is that it's care that is also driven on ROI, like a return on the investment.
Yeah, sure. That's such a common experience, right? Where there's like a quid pro quo. So just recognize that the part of it that is a transaction is not actually kindness. It's manipulation. And so if there's kindness there, receive that, but don't receive the manipulation. Just let it go. You don't have to respond to it either. You can just let it go, but recognize it for what it is. Now, oftentimes we want kindness and caring so much that we'll talk ourselves into thinking that manipulation is kindness because we don't want to have to recognize the situation for what it is. So it's painful. But real kindness is disinterested. It's just happening and it looks for ways to express itself. And it's not tied to whether you get something back. In fact, secret kindness is a great, great pleasure, I've always found. Doing little kind things for people that are secret, that they never even know who did that. That's really sweet when those opportunities arise. One thing we could do as a community is try to be more in our hearts more during this time when it's harder, when we're more tired. And if something occurs to us that we could do for someone else or to be more cohesive, some of us are doing that. Some people are thinking this way, but more of us should be thinking this way. Let your heart open to feel how hard this is for everybody and not just for you, if that's your condition. But we should be discerning. It's a tricky area. We should be discerning. A lot of times just in very, very ordinary relationships, there's always a bargain struck of some sort. And in dharmic relationships, there should be no bargain. We make so many compromises in our relationships in general because we're afraid of loneliness. And when there are things that need to be said, something can be badly received at first, and then someone has a chance to think it over, and then they receive it well a day later or a couple days later, right? So we do have to give people a chance to sort of process, because some people, when you're kind of changing the terms of the relationship and you're saying something that's asking for more intimacy and more care, some people can't respond well to stuff like that right away, but then later they respond well to it. But then there are people who don't want to hear those things or can't hear them. When that happens, very often, because we're afraid to be lonely, we will just sort of pass over it and feel badly about it, but not really change anything or do anything. But it's important to, if you're being a practitioner, to contemplate what relationships are nourishing and what aren't. It's a drain to be in relationships where you're not received. It's like going into a house expecting to be welcomed and there's nobody home. It's just like an empty house. We don't want to be in relationships that are like empty houses. And that's something for you to decide. And of course, we're afraid sometimes to share things that are a little risky or that we've been holding on to or that make us more vulnerable. I mean, when we ask to be cared for in a different way, or we ask for more care or more attention or something, that's a vulnerable position. And it can also be an extremely gendered kind of request. If it's a woman asking a male aspect for more consideration, more insight or something, that can be breaking a big contract with somebody that you're going to be the one that's there for them. And they don't even notice that they're not there for you. So there's a lot of stuff going on, right? And if we encounter a situation like that where someone cannot hear us, cannot host us, cannot respond to us, or simply doesn't want to, it's too much trouble, it's too much work, it's not what they want, they signed on for something else, then we should really give consideration to that relationship and whether it's one we want to keep engaging in. But oftentimes people don't do that because they're afraid. They'd rather be in a relationship with someone who can't hear them, doesn't want to hear them, can't host them, than not be in a relationship at all. And that's okay too. But just recognize, if that's your circumstance, at least recognize it. Even if we're making choices that are not ideal in terms of our lives as practitioners, we at least want to make them with eyes wide open, knowing what we're doing, what bargain we're striking. When I was much, much younger, there was a teacher. He wasn't my teacher, but he wrote a book that I read. He was sort of a self-styled, never actually had a teacher, tantric guru of some sort. And somebody just told me in passing, that teacher threw all of his students out because he was disappointed in them. They weren't good enough yogis or something like that. And we were just laughing about this and how ridiculous this was. But so often in life, we're disappointed in other people. As people who are practicing, or at least trying to wake up more in some way or another, we should recognize that the only reason we are ever disappointed in anyone else is because we didn't see who they really were. The only reason we're ever disappointed in someone else is because we lack clarity about their real situation and our real situation. Maybe we struck a bargain and ignored our own wisdom because we wanted something out of the situation. Or maybe we just didn't see something, honestly just didn't see some things. Maybe we had expectations that had nothing to do with who the other person actually is and how they're showing up. But there is literally never any legitimate reason for being disappointed in other people. And disappointment is a huge pattern that people have. The reason we have that pattern is because we lack clarity, which is just normal and natural. So, we're all on a road to gaining more clarity. But if there's something we don't see about a situation or a person, it's because we didn't have the clarity to see it. That's it, period. And it's not because we thought it was one thing and then the other person disappointed us. It's because we just didn't see how things actually were. I notice in especially love relationships, people are often trying to get things from each other that the other person doesn't really have to give. And then one person says, I'm disappointed in you because you didn't give me such and such. But that person never had that to give. or wasn't interested in giving that. This is just lack of clarity, plain and simple. And we may feel sad. I'm not saying you shouldn't feel sad. We can feel deeply sad about things. That's healthy. But running around being disappointed because other people didn't show up the way you wanted them to, or give you what you wanted, or hear you the way you wanted to be heard, that's just really out of view according to this kind of tradition. And so, of course, as we go along practicing, we gain clarity over years. And, over the years of practicing, we gain clarity. And then we start seeing things that we didn't see before. And that's the reason, because we gained clarity. We shouldn't then turn around and say other people are disappointing. When I was with one teacher I had quite a bit of clarity about his personality and its deficits. But then there was some part of it I didn't see from the beginning. And then later on, many years later, I had more clarity and I saw more about him, and I was shocked. But I was also, okay, I gained more clarity and now I see this and I didn't see it before. It's the same in all of our relationships. And it's one reason why our relationships change as we do more sadhana. Because we gain more clarity, we see more what's really happening. We're not lying to ourselves as much, and we can make better decisions about things. And some of those decisions involve not being in relationships with people we were in relationships with before, or not getting into relationships with people that we would have gotten into relationships with before. We also outgrow the bargains that we strike with people. So sometimes just the fact that we change and we don't want to strike the same bargains as we wanted to strike before can upset people. Well, you used to want this, and you used to be like that, and this used to be okay with you. So we also have to be clear about that. That can be hard to navigate, especially if we're trying to have no one ever be mad at us, which is an impossibility. So some people have a habit of disappointment and feeling disappointment in others. And that's what you have. You can't just go and make it go away. But you can recognize that it wasn't caused by anyone. It's important to stop blaming people for how you feel.
Does that go together, being disappointed in ourselves and then many times being disappointed in others?
Yeah. So I might do something or fail to do something that I'm not happy about my behavior, and I'll feel regret. I'll regret that I handled something clumsily, or I didn't do my prostrations today, or something like that, or I ate ice cream again, or whatever it was, or I treated someone in a less than skillful way. I'll feel regret about that. And I feel that regret leads to a determination to change, to transform that, or to just in a very simple way do better next time, or to learn from one's mistakes, something like that. But this kind of chronic disappointment in oneself, as if you are like somehow essentially lacking in something, or essentially disappointing, or essentially never hitting the mark. I think that's more what I'm talking about here. So I think having like momentary or even, some days or weeks of regret is not unhealthy. But feeling that you are disappointing or you are a disappointment is part of a karmic conditioning. It isn't actually true. It isn't actually true, because you were made by God, of God, and you are God's expression. And the way you're showing up is an aspect of, your unique dimension as a creation of this supreme self. So there is nothing disappointing about you at all. One of the things I think is a really great thing for us to do in lots of different arenas, but take the things that we're saying to ourselves about ourselves or even other people and put them in the mouths of great spiritual personas. Can you imagine the Dalai Lama coming up to you and saying, "I'm really disappointed in you"? I mean, anyone with actual realization would never feel or say anything like that. Teachers who have any realization, or practitioners or great adepts, do not say the things to other people that we say to ourselves. And I think that it's a kind of a useful device to, if you have negative internal dialogue, put that in the mouth of Jesus Christ, put it in the mouth of Buddha, put it in the mouth of Ma, and see how ridiculous it sounds.